Hello everyone, and welcome to This Nintendo Life episode 144. That's 12 times 12. That's a nice number. I always remember learning my times tables in the car. My dad drilled them through me. And, you've always got to remember your 12 times table. And that was the end of it.
12 times table was the hardest.
Yeah, it was.
And do you remember, it felt like some textbooks and some ways of learning times tables, they'd only go up to 10. But for some, the way we were taught, it had to go up to 12 for some reason.
Yeah, well, I think that's just generally how it's taught, isn't it? Right?
No, there are some... I've seen somewhere growing up where they only learn up to 10, and it's like,
okay, well,
that's easy. That's easy. That's small fry.
Yeah. It is strange, isn't it? Because you think it's a nice round number, 10, but it is helpful to know the 12
Remember, we'd have
table.
our times tables test once a week.
Yeah, well,
I was always so good at the times tables tests, and then we also had the what's the opposite of times tables?
Division.
It wasn't division. It was like adding and subtracting, but without a calculator.
Okay.
What do you call that? Arithmetic tests, but not without multiplication. And I was always way worse at that. Because I cannot say multiplication tests. They were just I know it. It's easy.
Right, because you memorize the answers versus adding things and taking things away.
But there were some people in our class who just kept getting it wrong. It's you gotta work in your memory. You gotta do it.
Yeah, no, exactly. I was always good at that stuff because I just have a good memorization capacity where I can just.
I don't have an incredible memory,
things.
but I was good at that for some reason.
You have a memory. You have a good memory for certain things. For other things,
one of those things that it worked. Yeah, exactly.
Sure.
It's not names.
When it comes to names and things like that,
the second it's spatial numbers and geography. I'm good at that bit.
Yeah.
That's your weakness, actually. We just found it out. Yeah, no, that's your weakness, geography.
Geography, anyway. I don't know where the fuck anything is or how anything connects to each other. That's my weakness.
It's
anyway.
Let's go. Let's meet up for a drink in Edinburgh. And you're like, where are we going? Where
exactly. I don't know. I don't know anywhere.
Anyway.
Yes, so welcome to the show. This is a Nintendo podcast where apparently we talk about multiplication. But yes, that's what we're here to do, is talk about video games, Nintendo, the like, and all things about. How you doing, Bally? We're very close to E3. We're just about a couple of weeks out at this point.
Feels a bit surreal. I know last year's E3, I had... I was off. I think I was between jobs actually, and I had this time off. We were going away to Loch Lomond for the week, and I was staying up late watching things, got all the coverage, and it's definitely going to be a bit more busy this time, which isn't going to be a ton of fun, but you gotta work it in.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, it's coming up soon, and we will of course chat about that at the end of the show. What we're going to be doing for E3, the shows we have planned, and that kind of thing. So stay tuned to the very end to hear that stuff. But Bally, do you want to tell the folks what we're going to be doing on today's show?
Sure. So it's going to be a 2-segment show this time, and let's be honest, we recorded the second segment first, and we overran. Yep. So in the second segment, we talk about the Mario Maker 2 information. Was it a direct? It was
it was positioned as a direct, yeah.
Exactly. And we're also going to be talking about Detective Pikachu. We both have seen that film, and we got some things to say about that film because there's some cool stuff in there. So yeah, hang around for the second segment for that. But this first segment, we're going to sort of do a bit of a Frankenstein's monster of segments where we're going to talk a bit about what we've been playing, and then we're also going to jump into an email. So that's going to be the first segment.
Yes, I appreciate that you say Frankenstein's monster and not Frankenstein, because that is maybe the most common problem with people when they talk about Frankenstein, because Frankenstein was the man, for God's sake. Read your literature. Get your Mary Shelley out of the bookcase, my goddamn person. Get reading. So yes, that is true. Fantastic. Well, let's kick off with some video games, and we've both been playing some very small little things, Nintendo-y things. So, Bally, do you want to kick things off with Golf Peaks?
Yeah, so I was just looking for little things on the eShop. I was like, I just kind of want to. It was like a Saturday morning. I was like, I'm gonna beat something here today. Like, what's short and interesting, and I can afford, because I had a good 4 or 5 quid built up of credit. And
gold points.
Gold points, and Golf Peaks was on sale, so I got the whole game for free. I think it would cost £3.50, £4, so I got it for free. And it's a really neat little puzzle game. It's made by Afterburn Games. They're like this Polish developer and publisher, and they it's a cool little 2 to 3 hours puzzle game, and it's like a good level of difficulty. It's sort of, I would compare it in line with something like Box Boy. It's not up there with, I found like Pushmo got really hard. I think
the latter stages of Pushmo are just overly complex in a way that like you kind of want to give up, basically, which I think we both did at some point, depending on how far we got.
I think there's some parts of the Swapper that are very difficult, and anyway, a few puzzle games, and so it was just my level of what I like in a puzzle game. And
right.
So what you're doing is you're getting the golf ball from the starting point into the hole, but you're doing that using cards. So you might have a card that chips the ball one space or puts the ball along the ground one space, and then you might have another card that does it 2 spaces, and then another card that will chip it in the air for 3 spaces, and then go for 1 space. And you have to play these cards in order, and you choose the direction you're playing these cards, so you can, there's a huge number of variations on what you can do. And there's bunkers, so you obviously can't hit a regular shot with the bunker, you have to hit an aerial shot. And there's bunkers, there's ice, there's
there's a lot of slopes, aren't there? Because I remember watching a quick look, and there's one level they were playing where they had to get it on this area, but it kept landing on the slope and therefore rolling back down. So I think that's one of those things that you may have to have quite a few goes at it in order to really figure out what the best path forward is. And I don't know if there are multiple solutions. It kind of looked like potentially there could be, but it maybe looks like there's multiple solutions where actually there is just one.
Yeah. I think definitely there's a lot of levels where there are multiple solutions. There are a handful, it feels, where it's very linear. There's only one. And I just really like it. I think it stood out to me because it's golf. I think golf is just such a fantastic video game sport. Like,
definitely.
I appreciate golf a tremendous amount, both playing it and watching it outside of video games. But in video games, I've loved games like Golf Story, Mario Golf. I think this is a really nice aesthetic for a puzzle game of this style. It really pops, it zings, and
it kind of has that isometric perspective. It kind of reminds me of Into the Breach in terms of like it's just this kind of square in the middle of nothing almost.
A golf course, what a golf course would look like in Into the Breach.
Yeah, basically, yeah.
And it is an iOS game as well. Like it definitely looks like that style. But if you just want a short puzzle game on Switch, definitely check out Golf Peaks.
And on that point of the iOS stuff, is it touchscreen enabled as well? Did you play it with a touchscreen in terms of like choosing the cards?
I believe it's touchscreen enabled. I never actually tried. I was just using the shoulder buttons and the analog stick because it was easier with the analog stick, but you're changing the direction you're hitting the ball.
Right.
And I had to look up like a couple of levels at the end because I was kind of done with the game, and there's actually more levels I can go back and play. Like it's not completely linear, where I think you've got a world of like 12 levels and you have to beat something like 8 to 10 of them to move on to the next world. Like it's not so strict that you have to there's like bonus worlds.
So it doesn't do the thing where you have to beat a certain or get a certain number of stars. Is it star rated in terms of each level? Because that happens with a lot of iOS games where it's like you get a certain number of stars in terms of like how many shots you took to get to the goal.
Oh, right. No. You can beat each level any way you want, and it's just about whether you beat that level. And so
it's not the case of like building up a certain amount of stars in order to unlock the rest of the levels type deal.
No, I think you just have to beat like 8 or 10 levels. I can't remember how many it is, but and then you've got a few more levels, like extra levels you can do if you're really enjoying that world and you want more levels of that style. So yeah, it's a really neat little game. Definitely recommend it. I think it came out like last year on iOS. I don't know if it came out this year or last year on Switch.
I think it came out this year on Switch, which came out earlier this year. Did they go any interesting directions in terms of mechanics with like, because I know that you can chip it and then you can like chip it and go like 3 spaces across. Like, do they add anything in terms of hazards or environments to change that up?
Yeah, there's moving platforms, the ice, the rough, the slopes. There's like warp pipes. There's
so it's less that they give you more moves you can do, and more that they change up the environment so that you can have different interactions.
Yeah, it's more environment, but move wise, they'll give you a lot more moves. There are some really cool ones where the course looks really simple, but the order with which you play your cards is crucial to like how the ball rolls when it undulates and gains momentum going up and down hills. And like you have to play a card. Let's say you have a hill that's 3 squares long. You have to play a card that's at least 3 squares long to get that ball up the hill. Otherwise, it's just rolling right back down. So you can find and it's so easy that you can keep undoing and redoing steps at every single stage. It's not like
that's good.
You don't play all your cards in a big row and be like, oh, I cocked it up. I need to go back. You don't have to start from scratch. You can just go back 2 steps or 3, 4, 5 steps, or however many steps you need, and it's all just really seamless. It's like this is a game that really knows what puzzle games have been in the past, and it's a very smooth, efficient game that knows exactly what a puzzle game on a Switch should look like. So yeah. Definitely check out Golf Peaks. I've also been playing SteamWorld Quest. I'm into that. It's a great game. I'm going to talk about that next time. Hopefully we'll have beaten it by then. And I've started Kingdom Hearts 3.
Oh my fucking god,
Caroline
why?
bought me it for my birthday. I'm a couple hours in, and Kingdom Hearts is weird, but I think,
wow.
Yeah,
now coming to the realization that Kingdom Hearts is a fucking disaster.
I always knew it was weird, but it's weird in a way I wasn't expecting, I think is what I should say. I think but playing a cool game in a Disney world,
you're a Disney fanboy, so
it does that really well, and I'm a Disney fanboy, so on that level I think I'm really enjoying it, to be honest. But yeah, I will beat that in maybe by not next episode, but hopefully the one after that or something. But I'll talk about that in the future. But yeah, MBZ.
In the future, yeah.
What have you been up
to? So one of the games I didn't get a chance to talk about last time was another very tiny game So I was having this rant on Twitter about how Nintendo are doing nothing with My Nintendo. It's a fucking waste of space, and like there's all these Wii U and 3DS deals on there and nothing of value. And then I proceeded to go and use one of those deals. So that's me for you.
I did wonder how you got this game. I was like, deep dive.
So I believe it was platinum coins or silver. I think they're called platinum coins, aren't they? I don't know. However, they're like a silvery coin color on My Nintendo, and there was a deal on there for this game called Splash or Crash, which is, you might not know it if you're in the Americas because it goes by a different name there, which is Kasploosh, because this was during the era in which there was constant stupid localization naming.
Europe cannot handle Kasploosh.
No, it's too hardcore for Europe. We had to be Splash or Crash.
I don't even think Germans can pronounce Kasploosh.
No.
They're struggling to say Kasploosh.
Exactly. It's a ridiculous name. So this is a game I'd known about for years and years. I think Dan Koopman had brought it to my attention a while back. It's a very small independent game on 3DS, which is about dropping a rock down a well. And the kind of hook behind it is that it really focuses on 3D, right? This was maybe during an era where 3D was a big deal on 3DS and people were just having ideas that took advantage of it and made it a more kind of interesting part of the gameplay as opposed to just embellishment, right? Which it kind of became as the years went on. It was less, we got less Mario 3D lands and more, just ported Dragon Quest games and things like that. So it seemed like less of a necessity for people to even put 3D in their game, let alone make it a core part of the experience, right? And so the whole premise of the game is like, you're dropping this rock down a well, and the 3D helps because that's the depth, right? So the depth perception is you dropping, but the idea is that as you're going down this well, it's an obstacle course, right? So you have an HP bar, and you also have a bunch of different obstacles in your way. You have rings that you can fall through to get extra speed. There are balloons you can burst to heal yourself in case you knock against something, because every time you either kind of graze against something or knock against something, you'll take a bit of a hit, and depending on how fast you're going, that damage will be increased as well. So if you're on this run and you're just going really quickly down the well and you suddenly hit something, usually you'll probably take a really big hit or you will die and you'll have to restart. So it very much is a case of, it's kind of a speed run game in a sense, like it's all about high scores and just getting down to the bottom of the well as quickly as you can. But also there's a few unlocks, right? So you start with a basic rock, but then you can unlock, crazy things like a watermelon. And the watermelon is way bigger than the rock is. It's this much larger thing, but it has a much larger HP bar as a result. So you can take way more hits with it. Or like you can get super hardcore. One of the last ones you unlock is a water droplet, and it's literally 1 HP. So anything you hit, you're just dead instantly. But it is very tiny, so it's very hard to hit things because it can kind of weave and duck between them quite nicely. And it is stupidly short in the sense that there are 10 levels. There's not really any embellishment to it. Each level starts with this really terrible dialogue exchange between two, I guess, characters who I don't even know who they are, and then you just go into the level and it's kind of the same dialogue exchange every time you do it. But I think a lot of it is just premised on playing again and again, and then playing the levels again and again with different objects that you've unlocked. So, when you get the watermelon, then you want to go through all the game again with it, I guess, or some people would maybe want to do that. As it was, I kind of went through the main 10 levels and then did a couple of other ones. I tried out all the ones I'd unlocked, and then I was just kind of like, oh yeah, I'm kind of done with this. But it's fun. Like I enjoy the premise. I think it's just a little bit short-lived, and obviously it is a very small game. It was stupidly cheap, so it's not going to kind of stretch you in terms of gameplay time, but it works, right? I think that the premise works, and sometimes it's a little bit cheap because what you're always focusing on is getting through the rings. Like the rings are really important because they build your speed and they'll help you get a better time by the time you get to the end of the well. But there are some times where you are speeding towards something, and at the last second you realize it's not actually a ring, it's a fake out. It's just like a stone platform with a ring kind of drawn on top of it. So there's no actual hole in the middle, and you just crash into the center of it. So a lot of the time it kind of is kind of like, hey, I got you type deal, where you just smash yourself into a thing thinking that you're going to get a bonus from it, but actually you're not. So it doesn't do that too often, but it does it often enough to where it can get a little bit frustrating in some of the levels. And it's like, oh, for God's sake, like there was no way for me first time through this level to know that was going to be there and going to trick me. So it is a bit of trial and error in a sense of just, you're going to hit things and you're going to fall down, and it's going to be a bit tricky. But it gets more complex later on. Like it tended to be a lot of the times just getting to the end of the level was the achievement in itself, because it gets pretty tricky and there are lots of obstacles, and you're going to have to memorize some of the level in order to get past it. So it was more me focusing on finishing the levels than like being really quick about it. And I think that's where they wanted the replayability to be, was like first time through, you're just learning the levels, you're going through them. Then as you get more unlocks and you get more things you want to drop down the well, then you're building up your records and you're just trying to put stuff on leaderboards and stuff like that. So as it is, very short game, very neat. I think it executes on a concept relatively well, does a decent job of it, and the 3D is great, and it's nice again to go back to a game where 3D is the main focus. And
we're gonna miss it. I think we're gonna miss it a lot when we finally play that last 3DS game. It's gonna be like, man, that was a cool thing.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's never truly gone. I always will have my 3DS. I can always boot up 3D Land when I want to go back to it. So
of course. Yeah, it's a very modern internet way of looking at the world. That like, where is my F-Zero? It's like, there's already a bunch of F-Zero games, they're great. But it's that idea that like you always want more, and then we know
you always want the new thing.
You always want the new thing, and we know that there's not going to be new 3D, at least for the foreseeable future. Yeah.
So it was neat. It was cool. If you can pick it up cheap, then hey, it's worth like 45 minutes or so of your time, which is about what I spent with it. There you go. Splash or crash, Kasploosh, whatever the hell you want to call it. It was neat. It was fun. I enjoyed it.
Cool.
So I think now we're going to go to an email to close out the segment before we move on to chatting about Mario Maker and Detective Pikachu and things like that. So Bally, you have this message from a service.
Yeah, a message from a service on Discord who says, "Howdy, where do you two land on the recent debates about whether or not it is appropriate to spoil that thing in Final Fantasy VII in anticipation of the remake? In general, I find the wide varieties of attitudes that people take in regards to spoilers fascinating, ranging from not really caring to complete media blackouts. How much do you care about avoiding spoilers? Have you ever gone media blackout for a game or anything else? If you haven't, do you think you ever will, or is it just not that important to you?"
Okay. I think this is an interesting question, right? Because we are in a place in time where I feel like it has been the internet that has really brought this to become a big cultural thing that it didn't ever used to be, right? Because like back when Star Wars was coming out, episode 1 and 2 and 3 for that matter, they put out books of the films before the films came out. So I knew the plot of Revenge of the Sith before it even happened because I had read a novelization of it, because that's just the way the world was back then and people didn't really care that much about spoiler culture, I guess. Like, it just has become a very big thing. And I think this year in particular is a huge deal because you not only have the finale of Game of Thrones, but also you have the culmination of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So, like, these two huge cultural icons that revolve around the nature of, is it spoiled or not?
When do you think that spoiler culture started?
Man, I don't know.
Lost?
Maybe,
Original
potentially.
TV?
Yeah, I do think it is the last decade or so that it's really become a big thing that people, and I think it's a lot of it has to do with the way that we interact with media these days, and like the attachments people have to media and how much nerd culture has kind of come to the fore, right? Because I think a lot of things that can be spoiled fit into that arena of like video games and big, comic book movies and fantasy. Like, all this stuff is, a lot of it is very much based on plot twists and things that are unexpected and surprising, and as a result of that, people want to experience it firsthand and not have the surprise pulled from under them. And I think, it's in the era of Game of Thrones, really, that this has become a big deal because that entire show is premised on shock and twists and surprise a lot of the time. So yeah, I kind of think that's where it's come from, generally.
I think spoilers are something I care a lot about. And
okay.
I care the most about them and also not very much at the same time in a weird way. So let me explain. So with something like Game of Thrones, the way that it comes out like episodically week on week, if someone has seen an episode and then they'll do a tweet like, spoiler free tweet, but wow, wasn't that a moment, or wasn't that an incredible episode? Even knowing that someone liked an episode, or even knowing that there's a moment in that episode that is impactful to them, and I still find that as a mild spoiler in my mind.
Oh, for fuck's sake!
Honestly, I like going into an episode not knowing whether there's an impactful moment, whether there's something that everyone's hyped about or not. I just like knowing that this is an episode where anything could happen, and if I see something online, this often happens with the Game of Thrones because it's impossible to black out to the degree that I'm expressing right now, and there are people that be like, whoa, that moment, incredible, or something, and I'll be like, right, well, there's something big is going to happen, and then we'll be watching the episode, and there's 15 minutes to go in the episode, so nothing big's happened yet, so I know that in this next 15 minutes something big's going to happen, and I don't like that that knowledge that I know something's big is going to happen, even if I don't know the specifics of what it's going to be.
Yeah, I mean, like, I get that, I do, but to me that's a step too far. That's just like people's opinions on things becoming spoilers, right? Like, my feelings towards something is now a spoiler. It's the same way I feel about people who talk about leaks as if they're spoilers. And, like, I get it, like, to some degree, right? It would have been cool if Nintendo had got to reveal that Ryu and Roy were DLC characters for Smash Brothers, or even, like, the final roster of Smash Brothers.
I'm not blaming anyone for sharing their opinions on Game of Thrones and thinking that it's not spoilery, but for me personally, it's this whole thing that Joanna Robinson sort of from Cast of Kings talked about, where like my Twitter timeline is my opinion, and if you come to, it's like my house. If you come to my house and start sharing, opinions, spoilers, whatever, it like that is your wrongdoing. I'm not against anyone sharing their own opinions, views on Game of Thrones, and even if they want to spoil the whole thing, that is up to them. You're totally within your rights to do that. It's just my own personal preference of what I like and like not to see.
Yeah, no, I get that, but like for me, so I'm kind of fall in the middle. Like to some degree, some things, if you spoil them, sometimes it gets me more interested, like that. And I think Jeff Gerstmann is of this opinion where he just doesn't give a fuck.
He really doesn't care.
He's like, tell me the ending of this thing, or like it was spoiled for him that the big MGS2 twist where like you don't actually play as Snake in that game was like spoiled for him, and he was like, yo, that's awesome, like I want to talk about this. But I kind of have a middle ground on it where there are certain things that I don't want to be spoiled, that I think are important for me to experience firsthand. And it's also like the idea of media blackout comes around, and with Star Wars especially, something that is very important to us that I want to go in knowing as little as possible. There will be times when, the new Star Wars trailer comes out and I'm like, no, I don't want to look at it anymore. But there are some times, like with Breath of the Wild, where I just kind of want to see everything because I'm so excited about playing this game. And despite all the stuff that they did show beforehand, that game was still full of just joy and delight.
It's a really
and
smart play with like the amount they showed the Great Plateau, and like going into that E3, I was like, and
even the January presentation where they showed off that bombastic trailer that had so many they were snippets
so quick,
and hints.
They were so I agree, that was within my realm, so that's fine. I'm not in a position where I'm going to avoid such a hype trailer when it just created so much excitement. And I really liked the way that E3 was done, where 90% of it was like on the Great Plateau, and I was like, right, okay, I'm going to spoil the Great Plateau for myself. I'm prepared to do that, but they have told me in good faith that like the Great Plateau is only less than 2% or whatever of the entire world map, and I was prepared to just know that going into Breath of the Wild, and then that just made the moment of going off the Great Plateau even more special, and I was prepared for that to happen as much as, because someone just in their bunker avoiding all of that E3 and all that gameplay of the Great Plateau, like that's totally up to them, but I just could never bring myself to do that.
Right, exactly. It's just too enticing. And it's interesting because in terms of plot, there's not much to spoil in Breath of the Wild. It's not a plot-driven game. Like so much of the joy of the surprise of that game was so small moments, like really tiny little things, like me accidentally, using a fire rod on a chew jelly and it turning into a fire chew jelly. Like that's just a magical moment of video gameness, but it's not something you can necessarily spoil, right? It just kind of happens and it's delightful, but it's not in the same traditional sense as we talk about like other media. And I think that the thing with Western games especially is that big Western games are so much more premised now on scripts and characters and cutscenes, right? And big moments that happen not in the gameplay but in the narrative that they've crafted. And as Nintendo fans, we just don't really get that often with Nintendo's games because that's not what they're premised on.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and so I guess like Final Fantasy VII is a big deal because it was that era in which games were becoming more story focused, right? And so the thing in Final Fantasy VII, which I'm not going to spoil here, because guess what, Acerbus, you found the one person who plays video games and follows the industry who doesn't know what you're talking about in Bali, because he just doesn't. There's this weird thing.
I'm good at creating blind spots. This is a big thing I should mention. Like, if I don't have interest in a game, which I basically didn't about Final Fantasy VII right up until the remake and it coming to like Switch, I'm very good at when people are talking about them on podcasts or stuff, I just zone out and like I'll appreciate what they're saying in the moment, but I won't remember plot at all. And so I'm really good at just Witcher 3 is a game I really want to play. I've listened to hours upon hours of people talking about it in podcasts, also including this story, and I couldn't tell you a single thing about that story because I just zone out when it comes to story, just because
if you don't have an anchor point for it, it's hard to do that, right?
I'm good at zoning out when I don't have an anchor point. Absolutely. Sure. And I've done that on loads of games.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing, right? For me, I'm this idiot who's a giant sponge of video game information, and for some reason I absorb it all. Like, I have pretty much no interest in StarCraft, but I can tell you the three races of StarCraft are the Protoss, the Terran, and the Zerg. I can tell you that StarCraft has a character called Kerrigan, and that she goes and joins with a Zerg for some reason. I can tell you that Brad Shoemaker, at the end of one of the Game of the Year discussions, talked about the ending of StarCraft, where, like, these two characters go and have space babies and some weird shit happens. Like, I don't know why, but for some reason I absorb all that information, and it's in my brain, and that's why I have this knowledge of things that I don't actually really care about, but I still know them.
I could choose. For whatever reason. I could choose to try to remember. I wouldn't be able to do it as sponge-like as you, MBZ, but I do it. I would be able to do it a lot better than I currently do. I just choose to zone out because it's easy, and there's a whole host of games,
and it also is really beneficial because, like, with God of War, the moment where he comes out of the lake, the giant fucking serpent comes out of the lake, for you is a mind-blowing revelation.
Because as much as I followed that E3 in 2016, was it? 17?
16.
As much as I enjoyed that God of War reveal, I zoned out. It's a game I was probably going to play at some point when I think even then I was keen to pick up a PS4 eventually, and this was probably going to be a game I was going to play, but I just zoned out. I knew that it was Kratos and the boy and Norse mythology, and that was literally about it. And honestly, I do think I enjoyed that. There was more surprise and shock at multiple moments in that game, perhaps, when I played it as a result, and I do really appreciate that. It's almost become like this anti-sponge skill that I've acquired that is quite good.
And I think for me, it's more that I very much like to know video game history and like to know touch points and things like that, and I'm very invested in knowing those types of things. So, like, I've known about the thing in Final Fantasy VII probably since I was maybe like 13 or something, because, well, another thing is that, like, I watched a lot of Flash videos on the internet of, like, video game stuff and stuff that I didn't really know about back then, but there was a cartoon from an animator called Legendary Frog, who I watched loads of stuff from, and it was called, like, Random Battles in Final Fantasy VII, and I think there is some reference to it in that video probably that I picked up on, and for that period of time I've known about it, and it's also one of those things that, like, I watch a lot of, YouTube, and having watched as much YouTube as I have, you just will pick things up from series that you just, like, I've watched Nintendo Capri Sun play through Final Fantasy IV and Final Fantasy X before I ever played a Final Fantasy of my own, and I still remember a lot about those games because I just do. It's just the way that my brain works. But it's interesting, right? Because I bring up this thing to you where I'm like, Bally, do you know about the thing in Final Fantasy VII? And you're like, nope, no idea. And I'm like, well, like, to some degree that's fucking crazy, because the thing in Final Fantasy VII is basically, and I explained it to you this way because it makes the most sense, this is for video games what the Darth Vader I Am Your Father is for movies. Like, it is maybe one of the most well-known quote-unquote spoilers in video game culture. And the fact that you have somehow wrapped yourself away from it is to some degree impressive, right? Because it is that big. Like, everyone knows it. Just everyone knows what happened in that game. So yeah, it's kind of phenomenal that you haven't. And there will be people, obviously, who have grown up, after that time, who are younger, who are gonna be playing the Final Fantasy VII remake for the first time, who won't know and will go into it not knowing. And I think it's interesting, right? Because to some degree, like, do we do that, like, when we have kids, whatever, do we do that with Star Wars? Do we make sure that they are shielded from Darth Vader is Luke's father? Or is it something that culturally they'll just know naturally as a result of,
hard to say.
Everything?
If you asked a kid who hadn't seen any of the Star Wars films, would they know that, like, Vader is Luke's father? Outside of that, I'd probably side with probably not, unless they've got a real film buff of a mate that a lot of people do.
I don't know.
Who's like,
but it is one of those things that just through media, through, like, toys and games and everything, like, you just, like, I'm pretty sure I knew it before I even watched Star Wars. I wasn't surprised.
Yeah,
but
I can't even remember
the other thing is, like, I don't think
it
it really affected my enjoyment of Star Wars, Like, Star Wars is bigger than that one reveal, and it's so much more important than that. And
but if you want to have if you want to have the most impact in that moment, then obviously not knowing it would be like, whoa.
Sure.
wow.
Sure, yeah, absolutely.
A bit
And
like,
it is like in episode 7
Exactly.
when we hadn't had it spoiled for us at all, and the whole notion that Kylo Ren is Han Solo's son. Like in the cinema, we turned to
were
each other.
like,
I remember
whoa.
that moment
Yeah.
because we turned to each other and we're like, dude, like it was so fucking cool. Like I just didn't expect it to be connected in that way.
Yeah. So
yeah.
like, should people and I do think people have the right to spoil whatever they like more or less on their timeline if they choose to. I think if you do that in the knowledge that you have a following, how big or small, it can be quite a selfish thing to do.
Sure,
but
yeah.
You're totally within your rights to do it. Will I be avoiding Final Fantasy VII spoilers? At this point, yes. I think I'm going to try quite hard to just shut myself off.
Do you think that me telling you that there's a big thing that happens in Final Fantasy VII has affected your potential to be spoiled just because you're now more aware of it?
To a degree, but like I said at
Yeah.
the start, as annoying as that is, it's not a game changer. It's just I like to go in as clean slate as possible. That's all. Like
Right.
it's not it's not a game changer in the slightest. So I would like to ideally play Final Fantasy VII like this year, or there's a lot coming out this year, so it might end up getting pushed to next year. But I would like to play it on Switch. And
Yeah, play the original for sure. Cause,
the original,
I
I mean,
did.
yeah. And then if I do really enjoy that, I might end up playing the remake on PS4. But yeah, I can't. And when there is a remake coming out, I think it is respectful to be more knowledgeable of the fact that as much as I am a minority, perhaps, especially amongst people my age, that will be a lot of people like me who will want to not know and just play this remake blind, because for a lot of people, as we've discussed, spoilers can, I think ruin is too much of a word, but they can make,
I don't think ruin.
they can make the
correct.
biggest impactful moments slightly less impactful, which
potentially
to some people is a big deal and to others is not a big deal. Like I know people in my office at work who, and my dad is bad for this as well, like the second you're in a film or they're watching a TV series, they'll like look up online all the plot of like the remaining thing, and then they will go back and still watch it through. It's like, okay, right, that's your way of enjoying this media, but that is not mine. But each to their own. And it's if people like that then just boast that they know what's going to happen, or they keep asking you how do you think it's going to, and it's like, I'm fine telling them how I think it's going to be, but the second they share like how accurate or inaccurate I am, that is frustrating. And it is, you've got to be careful around some people, don't you, because they just some people just love being a know-it-all and looking.
I feel like Ali T is kind of not necessarily one of these people, but like he doesn't really think before he speaks when it comes to
he
things
really
like spoilers.
doesn't, and it's not good. You gotta have some awareness, self-awareness of what you're saying, and some respect to those who might not want to hear it. And it's just, again, people should be more respectful online. Absolutely.
For sure. 100%.
I think that's the message that unites this argument throughout everything.
Yeah, definitely.
Like, everyone obviously has the right to spoil whatever they want, but if you know you have a following, if you know people will see what you're putting out there, think about who the people are that see it, and whether they would want to be spoiled or not, because I think it's a step to assume they would want to be spoiled, perhaps.
And I think the hard thing about video games is that as a medium, spoilers mean more because of the time investment. You think about a game like Red Dead Redemption 2, that game takes minimum like 45 hours to finish.
I mainlined that thing in like 50 to 55 hours, and it's a long game.
And so the whole idea of that game being spoiled is a bummer, right?
Yeah.
Because
the plot's the best bit of that game.
If you've invested 25 hours and you're really enjoying it and you want to see where it's going, and suddenly someone just says what happens, then you're just like, man, well, like
get lost, Ali T.
Yeah, it sucks. And I get that. I totally understand that. And I feel like as the medium becomes more story focused, more narrative focused, it becomes trickier to do. And it's hard because people want to talk about those things, especially reviewers. Once they finish, they're like, I want to talk about this to someone.
Yeah.
And, like they're dedicated spoiler casts that happen with
Yeah.
games and things like that. And
I was actually spoiled on something in Red Dead. I won't obviously say what it is, but
okay.
And I remember you were like, because you'd already beaten the game, where you were like near the end of the game, and
Yes.
I told you I thought I had seen a spoiler, and you were like, oh, tell me what it is, Bally, and I was like, I don't want to tell you because you're going to react to me telling you it. So then we agreed I was going to tell you it, but you weren't allowed to react in case I
exactly. I just stayed silent.
Right. So I think I just typed it into Skype or something.
Yes.
And, But yeah, because you were curious, but then I appreciate you didn't come back and say, oh, but that's a load of bollocks. Or, oh my God, I can't believe you.
Yeah.
So, and I went into that game and the thing happened and it was like, okay, right. And it didn't change how impactful it was massively, but it still maybe took a little bit of impact out of a moment, as I said before.
Definitely. So yeah, spoilers are weird, and everyone's going to react differently to them, and I think, especially in games,
respect.
Yeah, especially in games, it's tough because of the nature of them and how long they are. Like with Game of Thrones, if everyone watches it on the same night, like as long as you have an hour, take an hour out of the day to watch it, then you're fine, you're caught up, you don't have to worry about it.
Yeah,
but you can't do that with Red Dead 2.
That's funny you mentioned LAT because I do remember. I can't remember what series or anything it was, but there have been multiple times I've hung out with LAT, and I do feel very on edge about what he's going to say next about anything, and it is very like, jeez, goddamn.
But yeah, there are some things like Critical Role for me where there are so many video compilations online, and just because when you're watching something on YouTube, your YouTube recommendations will do things to you. Obviously, like you're just gonna get that. Like that's the nature of it. So if you want to be 100% safe, then just don't search anything on YouTube that you're worried about being spoiled on. But because I was watching all the Critical Role on YouTube, all these like compilations would come up, and like I was like 30 to 50 episodes behind at any one point in time. And like sometimes I just click on them and watch these little moments, and to be honest, just because of the nature of that show, it would get me more excited about the show, just because sometimes there are moments that aren't as good as the rest of it. Like the peak moments of Critical Role are like better than almost anything I've ever seen. So it really pushed me through to be like, oh, because I didn't watch that. It took me like a year and a half maybe to get through the whole first campaign. And there were times where I took like a couple of weeks break from it and stuff like that. But seeing those little moments of story that were to come, that I didn't know exactly what was going to happen, but I was like, oh shit, how do they get to that moment? What will happen to trigger this crazy shit to happen? That actually made me want to go back and be like, oh, I need to catch up. I need to get through this. So like there are moments where spoilers actually have incentivized me to get through something a bit more.
And there can come a point where once I'm spoiled on something that's fairly big, I'll just let the floodgates open and start doing that whole researching thing. Like it kind of, once you're enjoying it from a new angle, I almost sometimes want to fully enjoy it from that new angle, I guess is the best way to describe it, where you do know everything that's going to happen. And then when you're watching or taking in that media in whatever way, it is about the journey and how they get there, and less about the resolution, which obviously is a big reason why I'm quite against spoilers. I do like a good resolution.
I think that's why we're different is because like resolution means much less to me, and I'm far more about the entirety of the thing and the journey to get there.
You can't spoil a journey, but you can spoil a resolution very easily. For sure. So hey, that's spoilers in video games, and yeah, we live in a world where people like things and they don't want them ruined. So now everyone's going to tweet me with
Final
Fantasy 7 spoilers.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, well, you know what, Bally? That's what you get for being a public figure.
That's what I get
on the internet.
A public figure.
Yeah. Hey, you got to deal with it, man. Like I've heard so many stories of people like Greg Miller and Renee who say like, yeah, I got spoiled on this thing because someone tweeted at me because they're a dick and they don't like me on the internet. So which sucks. Like that's a bummer, man.
As much as it'd be great to have a huge platform like they do, I can totally appreciate that would be a really big negative part of having that platform.
Definitely.
So yeah.
All right. Well, that's going to close us out for the first segment. You can, of course, keep sending us emails, though, and Bally will tell you where to send them to.
Please send them to ThisNintendoLife@gmail.com. That's ThisNintendoLife@gmail.com. We'll mention this at the end of the show, but we want your E3 predictions. That's what we really want. So please send those in, or leave a comment in our Discord server on that. Link to that in the description, and on our Twitter account @TNLPodcast.
Absolutely. But yeah, we're going to take a quick break here, but we'll be back after that to chat about the Mario Maker 2 Direct and Detective Pikachu. So do not go anywhere. We'll be right back. Alright folks, welcome back to the final part of our show, and we've got a couple of things we're going to chat about, a couple of things, one's newsy, one is not so newsy, but also Pokemon and Nintendo adjacent. So we're going to chat about Mario Maker. The new Direct happened for Mario Maker 2, and we're also going to talk a bit about Detective Pikachu, the movie, because we both went and saw it, and it always, when video game movies come out, Bally, I'm always like, should I watch this, or should I wait for it to come out on DVD or something like that, and then services, and most of the time I do, like with the Tomb Raider movie and stuff, but I feel like this is
this one.
Yeah, and I feel like this is the big moment for maybe Nintendo and the movie business and things like that. It's the first kind of major step forward, even though it's not directly Nintendo. Obviously, the Pokemon Company and their relationship is very weird, but yeah, we both went and saw it. Went pretty early as soon as it came out, and we're going to chat about that. And we're probably going to do that second, so that if you haven't seen it yet, you can kind of duck out, because we're probably going to go spoilerish, I guess. Like just talk about the movie as a whole and things we liked about it. So yeah, you can duck out early if you don't want to hear our spoiler thoughts on that, but we're going to kick things off talking about the Mario Maker 2 Direct that happened recently, which it was interesting, right? Because we are in the lead up to E3, and it tends to be that, like, Nintendo do this thing, right, where sometimes they will focus on a game at E3 that is coming out in like 2 weeks, and people get very annoyed by it. People get frustrated because they spend 6.5 minutes of their 40-minute Direct sitting in a Yoshi factory with these cuddly Yoshis and the woman who made them just chatting shit about them, and they don't dedicate time to things that people actually care about, which, fair enough. But
the second they
depends.
take it outside of that E3 context, you can argue that the stream can be as long as they want, and because it's not wasting that valuable time that is used in the Nintendo Direct at E3.
And we've always had this weird relationship with the amount of time that Nintendo spends on screen and how much is actually revealed, because in recent Directs, they do the shotgun approach of bam, 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 loads of, or machine gun, I guess, of just non-stop games. So a 10-minute thing could end up with 30 new announcements versus, old Nintendo E3s where you could spend 10 minutes on electroplankton and a DJ and not really get anything significant out of it. Yeah. So, it's not really a good measure. There was that one year where they're like, it's going to be 25 minutes long, and people were losing their mind. And it turned out that they showed quite a lot in that 25 minutes, and it was pretty significant. So, in any case, this is all to say that potentially this means good things for E3 in terms of new announcements and things we've never seen before or have heard about but haven't been fully briefed on yet. So Mario Maker's kind of been getting out of the way because it is coming out just a couple of weeks after E3 is over, so at the end of June. We're about a month out from it now, which is exciting. And it's one of my most anticipated games this year for sure. I adored the first Mario Maker. I loved making levels. It was such a good time, and I didn't play as much of it. Most of my time with Mario Maker was in the creation suite. It was less time spent actually playing other levels, but I feel like it's probably going to be a bit more balanced this time, and I think a lot of the features they showed off in this Direct signaled that. What were your thoughts after watching this, Bally?
Yeah, I was pretty hot on it. did enjoy Mario Maker 1 a lot. I really enjoyed you sort of making levels and being like, hey, Bally, try this dastardly level I've made. And
it was far more like I was the Dan Reichert, you were the Patrick Klepek in this relationship,
right?
In terms of like I fell into the making hole much more.
Yeah,
and you did make a couple levels for me.
Yeah, I made
fun.
some. I would have liked to have made more. I just didn't feel the creative juices at the time, and I'm definitely feeling them a lot more with this one. There just seems to be more options. I've got more just ideas already springing up in my mind. I'm looking forward to trying to at least spend more focused time creating well put together stages with this game. And I think the sheer amount of new stuff in this game makes that prospect far more exciting than before. And I'm kind of tempted to pick up that like Mario Maker 2 stylus that you can get. And
well, I don't know if it's going to be available now, is it? Because
that's
it's
true.
Like a special edition, so you may not be able to.
I'll probably just get the Amazon Basics like touchpad stylus and go from there.
Yeah, I probably will get one as well because it's just you can't make Mario Maker stuff effectively without it.
As good as I'm sure those new controls are implemented, I'm nervous that it's just not going to be quite as good as that feeling on Wii U with the.
Well, it won't be. It's just not as efficient
Right.
and as direct. Like it simply isn't, which is a shame. But it's just the case that the Mario Maker weirdly was the perfect game on the perfect system, right? Like the Wii U was just tailor-made for Mario Maker in every way, and tailor-made for like live streaming Mario Maker. One of the things that is a little bit annoying about it is I loved watching people make levels and stuff like that, and it's so difficult to do that when you don't have the touchscreen available to you while also being able to spit out a video signal. And I know, very niche group of people who would use that, but I would be someone who would use that feature. So it's a little annoying that that's the case. Like if I wanted to make levels while streaming, I would have to use the physical controls and the controller and not actually have the touchscreen available. So but yeah, again, that's a very niche pet peeve that less than 1% of the people playing this will have to worry about.
What about that theory that in multiplayer you can essentially link two switches up, one switch is docked and the other switch is in someone's hand, yet the docked switch is on the big screen?
I wouldn't get ahead of myself on that because so far, it's enough of Nintendo pushing out the boat to include online multiplayer as anything, right? The idea of having co-op building online seems like a stretch too far for Nintendo. They're like, no,
I don't even mean online. I just meant locally. But
but that's what I mean, right? Is because even if you're playing multiplayer locally, you have to connect to a server to do that. So I imagine Nintendo would have to do the same thing if they were to do building online as well. But essentially what I feel is because the way they showed co-op building was just two people on one Switch, it's very much a Nintendo philosophy of, oh, you must be in the same room to get this true experience of communication and talking to the other person, and you can't have them talk over the internet with you and create this level. That's just not the case, which is bullshit. But it's Nintendo's philosophy, and that's kind of how they roll with things. So I don't think that's likely. I think that they are, as I said, kind of pushing out the boat already, giving us just regular multiplayer. So the idea of co-op creation is just like two people, one Switch at this point in time. And I don't think that's going to change. But I could be wrong. They could surprise me. So lots of new things announced, of course. I think the big one for a lot of people was that they are now putting out a story mode, a quote-unquote story mode, which I'm very skeptical about still. I think a lot of people are like, oh shit, story mode, like this is going to be amazing, it's going to be great. The original Mario Maker had what you can consider kind of a story mode, although it was more just like packs of levels that were meant to just give you ideas in terms of what to build, right? In terms of what are some cool things you can do with these new tools that we've made. Here are some things that may spark a thing that you may want to go off and just do something even crazier with. And for me, I think the 100 levels, like, great, that's cool, and I like the whole Peach's Castle aesthetic, like it's a neat idea. But from what they've shown so far of those levels, they very much look exactly the same as what Mario Maker 1 was. I think they're just putting it in a nicer package. I think they're just wrapping it up nicer. I feel like it very much will be... These aren't really levels per se. They're more like tutorials, like a 100-level tutorial of like how to use the tools, essentially. I don't think they'll be what people who pine for, like, oh, I want a new Mario World level. I want Nintendo to design new Super Mario Bros. 3 levels. I don't think that's what they are doing here ultimately. So I would temper people's expectations in terms of like the quality of these levels. Not that they're going to be bad, but more that they are going to be there for an intended purpose of teaching you, as opposed to being made and designed to actually be played as like a full Mario game.
Yeah, I'm. It's not the most exciting announcement for me, just because I think that the sheer joy of all the levels others are making and creating your own levels is obviously the main point of this game. But it's nice to see a bit more. It's certainly a tick box for a lot of people out there, and I'm glad.
Right, and it's the kind of thing where a lot of people who are playing their Switches offline, like on planes and stuff like that, at least if you have Mario Maker, now you kind of have something to do when you don't have internet connection.
Yeah, exactly. Because I think that what this direct also emphasizes is the sheer amount of stuff, the amount of the game that you will end up playing or linking up online in some way, whether you're creating, sharing, playing multiplayer, creating multiplayer online together, like creating levels or downloading levels and playing those. So like it's all this online. I think they are using it as a big push for signing up to Nintendo Online and that. So having this as a side thing, which I presume you can buy the game and play this mode without buying Nintendo Online. So it's kind of like covers their backs a bit in that sense.
Definitely, yeah. So yeah, it looks neat. I think that, you know, it'll be a good thing to just hop into. I think it's not one of those things that I'm going to sit down and the first thing I do in Mario Maker is play through the story mode. It's like, no, first thing I want to do is just get in there and make something, right? Like that's, and I really hope they learn their lesson from last time and just give us all the tools from the beginning. Like, for fuck's sake, that whole unlocking process was a pain in the arse, and they had to like patch it.
We'll just have an optional tutorial that can do it gradually, but if you want to, you can just go straight for it. Like, give options.
Yeah, for sure. That's just what they need to do, and it's really stupid in this day and age. And I think a lot of people were frustrated with Smash Brothers of like, the unlocking process for Smash Brothers is just kind of tedious. It's not very fun. It's not like, there used to be a time back in the day when Smash Brothers unlocking was just a thrill because there were so many weird, unique ways to unlock characters, and this new game was just like, I don't know, play Smash, and then they'll just appear.
And there's like it was weird.
Yeah, unless you wanted to go through the story mode and do it that way, which that was long and an arduous process. I wouldn't, begrudge anyone from not doing that and just wanting to get them ASAP, which is what I did, and kind of cheat the system. And people found ways to cheat the system for Smash Brothers in terms of speeding up the unlocking process. They did that with Mario Maker as well, changing the in-game clock, going back in, all that stuff. So it's very easy to kind of screw around with it and make it work in your favor. So even if they do make the mistake of doing a stupid unlock system again, then people will find a way. There's always a way. So yeah, and I guess the other big thing, like the major things, if we're talking about like important differences, is the online multiplayer, right? Which wasn't included before. You couldn't even do regular multiplayer in Mario Maker, and I am very excited about this because I feel that in terms of like co-op style gameplay modes and versus modes, there are going to be some very creative levels made. And I think that in terms of discoverability and everything these days, it's not only a lot easier with like YouTube and stuff like that, but them having the tags now, so you can tag it as a multiplayer versus or cooperative and things like that. I think players are going to create some really unique and interesting and very enjoyable multiplayer experiences that won't be just traditional Mario levels, right? Like, I can imagine some kind of space shooter style thing, like facing off against, someone else and stuff like that. I feel like there are ways for people to be really creative with it, and for us to go into it and be like, okay, Bally, do you want to play some Mario Maker co-op? And then we go on and we just find some really fun stages that people have created to be weird, just do stuff that is different. And I think probably my favorite thing about Mario Maker as a concept is, like, we are very loud about the fact that we're not the biggest fans of 2D Mario, the standard level-based 2D Mario. My favorite thing about Mario Maker was that you didn't have to make levels like that. I focused on puzzle levels. I focused on Metroid-style levels, like getting upgrades and like going back and through and stuff like that. And to me, that's a much more enjoyable way of engaging with Mario's core mechanics than it is to just run from left to right. Like, that's fine, but to me, it's not what excites me most about this game. And I think that idea of people just getting weird with it and doing strange, different things that you wouldn't expect, that's the thing that has me the most excited, I think, about this game so far.
Yeah, I definitely think, especially the puzzle aspect of levels with the new. Felt like there were like new types of switches or something. I noticed.
Yes, the on-off switch is a big one, right? Because the on-off switch can govern blocks. It can govern whether what are the platforms with rotate? No, they rotate around the conveyor belts.
Yes.
Platforms. They rotate depend on
speeds
forward or backwards,
dropping things, and
exactly. Yeah, so I feel like there is this light element of programming that has been built into Mario Maker 2. Like it feels a little bit like redstone bricks in Minecraft to some degree. These on-off switch, like definitely nowhere near as complex, but I feel like we're starting to get a little bit more of that deeper programming stuff into Mario Maker.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's exciting.
And just setting traps and two-player co-op puzzles. Like I think the room for what you can do versus the first game, where there weren't half the number of switches. Obviously, there was no multiplayer. I think it just multiplies it like exponentially, like where you can go with this game.
Yeah, absolutely. I already have like some ideas rattling around in my head for like, what could I do with a two-player co-op level? And yeah, there's definitely some fun things, and I want to mess around with a lot of these tools and kind of figure them out. So yeah, loads of other things announced. Is there anything you want to pick out, Bally, in particular, to talk about?
I think what's got the internet talking the most is there's a slot next to 3D World.
Yes.
So we know that 3D World is a completely unique tile set that it doesn't link up.
Yeah, and how do you feel about that as like a separated thing? Because I kind of get it. Like a lot of the mechanics from 3D World and the enemies and stuff like that, they're not really able to be replicated in the other modes, and especially the cat power up, where you can like not just run up the side but run up the background. There's a lot of interesting things going on with it, and I think I'm excited to check it out and see what it's like, but it maybe feels like it's a bit more stripped back in terms of the number of possibilities you can do, right? Like it, because it's on its own, it doesn't feel like it has access to maybe the full tool set in the way the other.
But I feel like because it's separate, it can do its own thing and run away with that. And I feel like the style itself might have been held back had they tried to shoehorn it into the tile set of the other traditional 2D Mario. So
totally, because it feels a lot closer to what 3D World is. Like it feels like a more true translation of 3D World in 2D.
Absolutely.
In this setting at the moment.
So yeah, the whole speculation about what that other tile set is going to be, whether it's
what would you put your money on, Bally? If you're betting in Vegas, what's the next theme that's coming?
It's
and is it DLC, or are they going to show it at E3? What's your thoughts?
I think they'll show it at E3 because I think there's not normally like a space waiting to be filled by DLC. DLC, they normally remap a menu, you know?
Yeah, Nintendo are usually quite deliberate about things like this. They're like, oh, look at this.
I'm going to go for a dark horse on this one, where I feel the favorite is Mario 2, and maybe after that it might be I don't know, maybe Mario Land 2 is more of a dark horse than this suggests, but I do think it will be Galaxy. I think there are 2D elements of that game. I think there's a lot of gravitational pool stuff that they could introduce, the pool stars.
And they also already have a bit of gravitational stuff with the night versions of levels, where some of them the Goombas are floating about with low gravity. Some of them you have low gravity that you can use as well, kind of slow-mo-y type stuff. So there's definitely precedent for that, vein of mechanics to be kind of injected into Mario Maker. I guess like in 2D, in terms of some of the planetoid stuff and like gravitating towards an orbit and things could be interesting. I don't know how it would work out, but for me the tricky thing about that is like the tile set, right? Does it stick to a similar look to 3D World in terms of the Mario design and stuff like that, and just throw in different elements to it?
I'm not sure. But certainly there's a whole host of power-ups that are fairly unique to Galaxy that I think would be nice, in the same way that they've got that cat suit in the 3D World. Just more cool stuff.
If I'm honest, I think it's actually more likely that we see an Odyssey style theme rather than a Galaxy one. And I think that's just because we're in the Switch era and Odyssey is a more recognizable thing. But also, I think with the Cappy mechanics, you can do things that are far more interesting in the 2D setting with that as opposed to the gravity stuff, which I know the gravity stuff is cool, but like I feel like the toss the cap, jump on it, like do extra dives. You can do some really fun stuff with 2D gameplay with Cappy.
What about the whole capture mechanic of like all those things they could put in?
Oh boy, yeah. Well, yeah. Now you say that, maybe they won't do that because that seems like an overhaul. Of,
I mean, they wouldn't.
a huge degree.
I think they would handpick a selection and maybe add a couple that they feel might work particularly well in a 2D setting. For example, I think something like the Moai glasses or the little dude, the little vegetable dude in the forest area with the long legs. Yeah, so I think that there are some of those that would work fine in a 2D setting. Maybe the Tyrannosaurus Rex is a bit.
Yeah, I mean, it could be like in the original New Super Mario Brothers where he turns into a giant Mario. It could be just turn into a T-Rex and wreck the whole stage potentially. Like I can see that happening for either of those. I still think the odds-on favorite is Mario 2, just because people have been shouting about it forever, and I think that it fits because it, like, previously the argument was they can't do Mario 2 because it wouldn't be able to switch between the other ones. But now that we're in this world where they have decided we're having a break from those main ones and we are separating them, it does indicate that the possibility has been achieved at this point, where it's like, okay, if they're gonna take that step and say other modes, then now we can very safely kind of just say Mario 2 is in there and it's separate, it's its own different thing, it's very weird, but they can still roll with it. So yeah, I'm excited. I feel like we'll probably see it at E3, and I think that's kind of the tee up here, is like they get most of the information out of the way before E3, and then they maybe have a couple of minutes dedicated to it in their presentation, and like, hey, Mario Maker, coming out soon, here's a quick another trailer showing off this, and then they're like, oh, Mario 2, and that's the big drop from E3, that's the news for Mario Maker, essentially. So yeah, I kind of agree with you on that one, for sure. Yeah, I think that's most things. Like, obviously, we've got lots of little different things. The sun is back. We've got slopes, obviously was the big deal from before. And just lots of little different mechanics that they are tweaking. And a bunch of new kind of settings, right? So we have, like, desert now, and we've got underwater. You can now do, like, half water level, half land level, which I think a lot of people were crying out for, because kind of gives that potential for
like rising water, rising lava, descending water, lava.
Exactly. You can do a lot of fun things. You can now have vertical sub areas, which is very exciting, because I was someone who tried to do a lot of verticality in my levels and constantly had to like split it into like individual sections because it was always horizontal, right? And so you didn't really have the space. But if you have a huge space of vertical stuff to work with, that makes it so that certain types of levels are much easier to deliver on. So that's the thing that's very exciting to me personally, is the vertical sub areas. And obviously, I think the one that's actually the most exciting is different completion conditions. So the potential that instead of just touching the flag, what if you had to collect 10 coins before you finish the level? Or what if you had to kill 3 Goombas? And that is that's the hook for me, because in terms of puzzle levels, you can start to really get devious with hiding coins, and it could be like, the whole level could be huge, and it could be find 3 coins. And there are these 3 coins in these very specific areas that you have to just find. And it's all about exploration and figuring out the kind of grander puzzle of the level, which I like the idea of. And I think that makes the best Mario Maker levels for me, the ones that I'm interested in. So, yeah. And obviously each one has a night theme, which changes things. The whole upside down thing, I think, is just a little bit... I don't know if many levels will use that, because that just throws me off so much. I don't enjoy upside down stuff. It makes me uneasy. I find it very difficult to play stuff like that. Confuses my brain, as it's supposed to. But cool. I feel like that's kind of it. Like they also announced this weird thing with the vouchers, which, like, great for people who live in America, because it seems like when it comes to the US market, most games at retail hold their $60 value for Nintendo, and also they're the same price on the eShop. So like there's this parity in price for America, whereas over here it's like Mario Maker is 50 quid on the eShop, it's listed as 40 quid on Amazon. Like, that's a 10 quid save. It's like, when you live in a country like ours, there's no reason to buy digitally. It's so stupid to do so because the prices are so obscene comparative to retail. And I think retail here is generally a lot more competitive because there's no base price that is set. Whereas I think in the US, it's like it has to be $60 because that's what we set it at. Whereas over here, retailers can kind of have competition between themselves by constantly being like, oh, I'm going to take a pound off here or whatever. So yeah, when it comes to us with the vouchers on the eShop is 84 quid. And I was looking at Amazon and I'm like, well, if I buy 3 houses and Mario Maker on Amazon, I can get them both for 83 quid. And that's just the standard price. And this voucher, this thing that's touting as you're going to save money, in fact, I can save even more money by just buying them physically, which is just a bit ridiculous. But.
Yeah. And the thing is, in a year where Mario Maker and, well, plan to be Animal Crossing coming out, those are both games that would be really nice to just have on your Switch. So going digital is quite tempting to
the one thing I will say, right, is that if you do go digital, you do get the gold coins. So
yeah,
potentially
solid 10%
you make
every time.
Right, you make 4 quid. It's 5%, I believe.
5%.
10% would be quite a lot. That would be
you're
really
right.
good.
That's
crazy. So you would get £4.20 back, which is pretty solid as like money off your next purchase. So maybe like in some sense, like maybe I do this deal just because I get the gold coins, but you have to weigh like, is that really worth it? Blah blah blah. It's tricky, and yeah, I personally bought the first. It was really weird on Wii U. The first Mario Maker was 30 quid, 35 actually. It was 35 quid on the eShop. So I downloaded it because it was kind of the same price as it was retail. So. But that was just a lucky thing that it kind of worked out in that time. And Animal Crossing actually as well on 3DS, I got it downloaded, but that was through a program that they were doing where you could download a free game if you bought certain other games. So yeah, I have had both of those series digitally, so maybe it does feel a little weird to get them both as hard copies. But we'll see closer to the time how I feel about that and whether it's really worth sacrificing that extra money for it. Yeah. Cool. I'm excited. It's coming out very soon. I don't really want to see that much more of it because I just want to jump in day one and just get my hands on the tools and just make a bunch of shit.
They did well with this 15 minutes, but let's not have a full more than a couple of minutes at E3. Like we do that if they want to do that cool reveal of what that last tile set is. Great, go for it. Need the game to come out. Let's move on.
I mean, potentially the Treehouse stream is where they can do that reveal. They could do that as well.
That would be a good place to reveal that. Absolutely.
Yeah, and actually, I'm really looking forward to the Invitational. They announced that as well, so that on the Saturday, June the 8th, they're going to have a Mario Maker Invitational alongside their Splatoon and Smash Brothers tournaments.
That's cool.
The best stuff that they have done live was Mario Maker stuff, so I am very excited for this. Like, that event when they showed off Mario Maker fully for the first time was the thing that turned us around on Mario Maker, because I very much remember before Mario Maker came out, when it was first announced, we were both like, whatever, we're not into 2D Mario. As soon as we watched that, and I think you were over at my house and we were watching it together, we were just in. We were just so on board with Mario Maker watching that competition, because it was Mario levels that we'd never really seen before, like just so creative and so weird, and the competition aspect, it was brilliantly done. I hope they do that well again this year to show off some of the new features and some of the exciting things that are coming.
Absolutely.
So yeah. All right. Well, let's move on then, and we're going to talk about the movie Detective Pikachu, which came out a couple of weeks ago now, and internet has talked about it a lot, and people are varying degrees of positive on it or negative on it, or however you want to feel. But yeah, we're going to chat about it, and we're kind of maybe give some spoiler-free thoughts for a few minutes, and then we'll probably go into spoilers, and we'll let you know when we do that, and then you can head on off if you're not wanting to be spoiled on that. So Bally, give me your broad thoughts on Detective Pikachu. How did you find it as a movie?
They successfully pulled off a coherent, real-life Pokemon world in a film, and for that simple, very difficult goal, I think the film succeeds and was very enjoyable. I think on top of that, within there are characters and a decent story, and you see enough different Pokemon that you really are enticed, and you think, wow, where's this going? And that is a huge ask for a a franchise as big and successful as Pokemon, and they pulled it off. I think they hit it out the park. Actually, I think it's a very good film with a really difficult task that they succeed in.
Yeah, for sure. I was really impressed by it. I really enjoyed watching it. It was a film that I didn't really have that much expectations for. Like, I knew it was touted as being pretty good, but like that only goes so far, right? Because we're comparing it to video game movies, which generally are just a fucking train wreck. So for it to not be a train wreck and in fact be coherent and pretty good, I think is a bit more impressive, I think, and I think we give it a bit more praise because of that. But genuinely really enjoyed it and thought that there was lots of great references in there, lots of hints at potential expanding of the universe and things like that. And if this is a pitch for a Nintendo-style cinematic universe, then it makes a very good opening gambit, I think. If they want to tie things together and go the Marvel route, then I think Nintendo is one of those few companies that could potentially do it, despite the fact that they're really not storytellers, and they don't. That's not their forte. But if they can partner with companies that kind of know how to do that stuff, then great. And I think that they did very well with this film, and I enjoyed it a lot. And it's just one of those things, right? Because when you're a kid, you always dream of, I wish that Pokemon were real. That's what I did when I was younger. I was like, I wish that I could just live my life going on a Pokemon adventure, and I could literally just spend my days going out catching them, being the very best. It was a dream, of course, but it feels like that dream has kind of been realized. And yes, a lot of the Pokemon look fucking weird. Like the Ludicolo is just terrifying. I feel like there's a lot of versions of these Pokemon.
But I think that is, if you actually step back and think about how terrifying Pokemon would be,
right?
I think they would almost look overly cartoonized if they weren't terrifying. If that's how they envisaged them. So when you do get your furry Jigglypuff or your bar Ludicolo at the bar looking terrifying, or I mean, I know that some people think that Gengar looked a bit weird, and I can appreciate that, but they look great. I just thought they looked like you could actually touch them, and they actually looked. They almost looked like they had skin and fur and were moist and sweated, and it was weird. Yes. You know what I mean? Like yeah. And that's really
a little bit too real, maybe
too real. Absolutely.
Yeah. But yeah, that's kind of what they were going for, and they nailed it. Like, they chose an aesthetic, they went with it, and and it paid off. I think I enjoyed it a whole lot. And I would say go see this film if you're a Pokemon fan. I would recommend it, right? Like, I don't think that this is necessarily a film that converts people to liking Pokemon. I would say it's a very funny film. I think it's really... I think Ryan Reynolds is just excellent as Detective Pikachu generally. He gives a great performance and really carries the movie, I think. Like, I like the main character. I think he's good. Like, he's okay. I think the main female protagonist is fine as well. Like, I think they're both fine. They're not amazing. They kind of have kind of cartoonish bent to them in terms of their acting, but they are
the most kiddie part of the whole thing, right? Maybe them and their story.
So that's what carried it for me, was Ryan Reynolds, I think, as Pikachu.
But that's the thing about Ryan Reynolds as Pikachu, and when you look at like that horrendous Sonic trailer, and people were like, "Oh, it looks horrendous," but some others were saying, "Oh, but my kids really enjoyed it. Of course, it looks fine." Like, kids don't know anything, and I think that when you look backwards at the most successful kids films of all time, they always have something to appeal to the adults, the parents in the room.
Yes.
And I think Ryan Reynolds and the writing and the jokes in this film had that. Like, it meant that this film could appeal to more than just the young kids who might have played Pokemon, and the older kids like us who have played the first generation of Pokemon and had a really good time with this film as well. Like, I think this film did a really good job of appealing to loads of different age groups, and that's something that every successful franchise tries to do, like, you know, Star Wars and the Harry Potter and that sort of thing. And I think that this is a real evolution, is maybe the most cliche word ever, but it's an evolution of what Pokemon can be and what it can do, in the way that it can just appeal to that wide-ranging group. And actually, this makes me think of a story, which is when we were younger, and it was the third Pokemon film with Entei, so the anime
Yes.
Pokemon film, and I was going to
Yeah.
the cinema with my dad because my dad couldn't convince my mom to also come, so it was just the two of us. My dad was taking up the shift of like going to see this really kiddie film, and who comes out the cinema but MBZ and his dad, and our dad
And my sister, she was there as well.
and our dads
Yeah.
basically exchanged a, well, that film was a load of shit. And good luck to you, because you're now going to have to endure that with Alistair. And it's like, right, great. So, and I think the fact that both of our dads clearly did not enjoy those films, there was not much in those films for our dads. I think not that our dads saw these films, but they would probably have got more out of them and had a better time than, the traditional anime, arguably more kid-orientated Pokemon films of the early noughties, because they're the only ones that made it to Europe.
Yes, yeah. I think they stopped after the third film. Like
Right.
the Celebi, I should say, never came out in cinemas. It was like a straight to DVD, and then after that, they were all straight to DVD releases, basically over here, which made sense because it was kind of past the craze. Like when you kind of crested, like Gold and Silver kind of was coming off that, like it was kind of coming down the wave of it, so it made sense to move on and do something else. But yeah, I enjoyed those. But yeah, Detective Pikachu, very good. So maybe we'll talk a little bit about spoilers now. I'll put a timestamp in the description where you can skip ahead, because we're going to tell you what our E3 plans are after this. So I'll just skip ahead to that if you want to go to the description to get past what we're talking about with Detective Pikachu spoilers. So final warning, and then we're going to go into it. And I'm accounting for the people in their cars, Bally, who are driving, waiting for the traffic lights. Give them a couple of seconds. All right. I'm going to spoilers. So I was kind of surprised, actually, because I had gone into this movie thinking that it was unconnected from things and it was just going to be its own universe and kind of just set in its own world. And surprised to find that, like, when they talk about Mewtwo, they're like, oh yeah, Mewtwo escaped from Kanto 20 years ago. And all of a sudden I'm like, oh shit, here we go, son. Like, the direct connection, the calling out of Kanto, the idea that, like, the original Red and Blue potentially canon in this universe, the fact that, like, maybe it's like, it could be connected to the anime or to the game, but, like, in both events there is that idea that Mewtwo was being experimented on and then escaped. Like, I think it's Cinnabar Island stuff that happens in like Red and Blue, and then obviously the anime has the entire Giovanni thing and it leads to the first movie, blah blah blah. But that very idea that we're set in this universe that actually is connected, and that it does have wider ideas in terms of its universe is exciting to me. I don't know how you felt about that, but that just made me think, okay, they can go places from here.
Everything you've said I absolutely loved, and I agree, and that's what made a lot of the film very exciting. But at the same time, that's what kind of made the city that the film focuses in a bit more disappointing in my mind, is that the world that they talk about, where there are Pokemon battles and there are trainers and this, the whole gym system, whatever, and then you have the city where I've forgotten the name of the city, but
Rhyme City,
Prime City, like
Rhyme
City,
yeah.
Right. The whole point of Rhyme City is that there are no Pokemon battles and, like, it's been outlawed,
right? And there's the underground where Charizard fights Pikachu, and
right, and Pokemon and people live more in cohabitational, and it's a bit like, it kind of didn't work for me on a number of ways. First of all, are we now accepting that, like, Pokemon battles are cruel and that's something that should be banned? And secondly, like, I'm here to see Pokemon battles. I don't want to be in a city where this doesn't happen.
I'm all for Pokemon cruelty, man. That's my jam.
I mean, I don't know. Should we treat Pokemon like animals? Is it cruel to do X? I don't know. Is it cruel to put them in battles? Because, I
mean, like, the universe doesn't seem to think so, right? It does.
That's why the universe doesn't seem to think so, but the city does, and that's what is kind of weird. I don't know.
Sure. I mean, to be honest, I think that the idea is an excuse, right? Because they want this vibrant world with Pokemon all over it, and you can't do that if they're all in Pokeballs all the time, right? Like, you can't have that world where they're just out in the open, just milling about, if we take that idea, because traditionally Pokemon, they keep them in their Pokeballs and they only come out to do specific things. Like, otherwise, it's wild Pokemon are there, but then there aren't really others who are just
for a very city-focused film where you're not in the country a ton. I can see that. I totally get the reason why they did it. I don't like the connotations, perhaps.
Sure. Well, they do give us like a taste of it, right, with Cubone at the start, and then they have that montage at the beginning where they do show the giant stadium where like
that was cool.
Facing off.
But it's almost like building to something that this film doesn't really focus on. And I don't get me wrong, I love the story, but it's kind of like now I just really want that more traditional idea of Pokemon.
You want Pokemon Red and Blue,
like everyone wants. Yeah, exactly. And maybe it's sensible that they started with something a bit less on the nose, and once you're hooked on the universe, you don't start with the Avengers, you start with Hulk or Iron Man. Is that maybe a bad comparison? But you don't start with your best card, arguably, which for the Pokemon franchise would be a red blue film, wouldn't it? So
yeah, exactly, for sure. And they could do some really nasty marketing shit with Red and Blue as a movie, because they could do 2 versions of this movie in which some scenes have different Pokemon to other scenes.
No way.
Yeah, dude, look, listen to that, because, man, this is my marketing genius idea, is make Pokemon Red and Blue and make people go see it twice so that they can see the version where there's a Noctowl instead of, Sceptile.
I mean,
right?
As mad as that idea sounds, that was still the idea by someone at Nintendo and the Pokemon Company 20 years ago.
They would fucking do that, and they would make the money. And idiots like us would go and see it twice because we're idiots, right? They would do that.
We bought
100%. And I mean, they're kind of already doing that now with the Pokemon cards, because I didn't get any when I went to the cinema, but apparently, I think maybe it's just in America where they're giving out Pokemon cards like they did at the first movie.
But having said that, a colleague at work, their kids back into Pokemon cards. Like, Pokemon cards are
really
on the rise now, right here in Scotland, in the UK, and I did not predict that in 2019.
You know what, Bally? Pokemon cards have always been cool, and they'll continue to be cool forever until the 8-year-old turns into an 11-year-old, and suddenly it's not cool at school anymore, and they have to give it up. And
I don't know.
Just like,
these
or like us, just
that.
be silent about it and keep playing it into our late teens and early 20s and late 20s, and just never stop playing, basically. Yeah.
Once a Pokemon master, always a Pokemon master.
Always a Pokemon master. I also was interested because there's a twist at the end with like the dad and the son, right? And I was fully hook, line, and sinker for it was the evil son, because I'm like, this is a kid's movie. This is going to be a simple plot, blah. And then they do actually get me with a twist, because I didn't expect it. I didn't expect him to be the evil one to be controlling Mewtwo.
I mean, I'm awful at predicting things like that in plot lines, but
no, because I'd been listening to stuff and people were like, oh yeah, it's so predictable. It's just a very basic kids movie, blah blah blah. So I was fully expecting to just be like, yes, here's the clearly evil guy who's going to clearly be evil and the villain.
And then seeing Ryan Reynolds and Mewtwo's actually a good guy, and you're like, this is great. Like, I love this. Yeah, I'm very happy with that ending. Just so happy with this film generally, and it's
just a lot of fun. Like, it's a really fun film. It has good pacing to it. It doesn't overstay its welcome. There's loads of good moments. I think one of my favorite moments is him depressingly singing the Pokemon theme song as he walks down the road.
The animation on Pikachu is maybe one of the best bits of this film. Like, he is so adorable. It's ridiculous.
Yeah,
like,
it's really good.
And the CGI on his fur and everything is. Yeah, and like little nods like that song, the main theme from the original anime, is just
right.
They really know what this film was wanting to be, and it's got a real self of what it's going for. And that's not really something you can always say about video game films, and it's also true to Pokemon at the same time as being its own thing. And it's
definitely,
two birds with one stone in that way was just not what I thought this film was able to do. And I pray that it's made enough money to encourage the Pokemon Company, which was weird seeing like the Pokemon Company just at the start of a film like their DreamWorks or something, just like, the Pokemon Company, there you go. They're the company behind Pokemon, obviously. Here we go. There they are. This is their film. Got their stamp on it.
That is the thing though, is like, Pokemon is literally the most profitable media franchise in history. Like, it has made more money than Star Wars. It is obscene. It is a money-making machine. And yet, this is the first time that it's hit the big screen in a way like this, which is surprising, right? You would have thought that they would have gone this route years ago. This series is 20 years old, and they've only kind of just got around to it.
Maybe it's the CGI limitations. I don't know, because
I don't think so. Because I think those films did exist back then, right? Like,
it wouldn't have looked as good as it would in the sense that it's come out in 2019, and we can agree that the CGI looks incredible. But
sure.
Yeah.
But also, like, we have to take into account, like, Japanese company, very conservative when it comes to things like this, and not risking IP and not doing, like, things with it. That said, like, I think that the Pokemon company is generally far more flagrant and, they do a lot of nonsense with their IP, with bad video games and bad other things that they do, potentially, that Nintendo wouldn't do with their own properties. But... you do think that this entire movie has come about as a result of the renewed resurgence in Pokemon interest as a result of Pokemon Go coming out.
Yeah,
like, this movie, I don't think would exist without the ridiculous cultural phenomenon that Pokemon Go was.
Right.
So it kind of opened the door to just blow it open again. So they did, and they made it bigger and better. So. Yeah, a few other things that I really enjoyed, reference-wise. The giant Torterras, which was crazy how big they were, but also it's kind of a reference to the episode of the anime where the Pokemon are giant on the island, which I thought was neat. And also Pikachu using Volt Tackle, he gets all the recoil and he can't get back up. I like that. I like that he uses Volt Tackle, and the actual limitations of the move is that you're going to get smashed in the face with recoil, son. You're going to be real hurt. And he is real hurt. He's just like lying on the floor. He's like, Tim, I can't do anything. So, yeah, I don't know. There's so many tiny little things, like from all the posters in his bedroom for like the Sinnoh League and all this other stuff. It shows that there's a history to the world and that like it's bigger than you think it is.
Yeah. There's like evolution stones all over that guy's office, and
right,
Eevee just casually evolving.
He's sitting in front
Flareon.
of like these 3 statues of Dialga, Palkia, and Arceus, which is great. I think a lot more Pokemon than I was expecting in terms of not just sticking to the Gen 1 lineup, having some other weird Pokemon in there that you wouldn't necessarily expect.
And like showing off all the characters from the film in the style of anime that is in the original Red and Blue, like at the end of the film.
In the credit sequence? The credit sequence
that's
is
such
so good.
a well-educated nod, pleasing a lot of people in the audience in a very particular way, like our generation. Like, that's...
Man. I think that's the thing that's really important here, is because I think the people who made this film are fans. Like, it really does show that the people who made this film knows this franchise and knows a lot about it and are really invested in it and making something that is that lives up to it, right? And that's part of the reason why it works, is because unlike the fucking Sonic the Hedgehog film, which seems like it doesn't have a clue,
it's proud to be Pokemon. It's not trying to be something else.
Right, exactly. I mean, to some extent, the Sonic the Hedgehog movie knows exactly what it is. Sonic's been a fucking train wreck for the last however many years. So yeah, potentially, sure. But this really does, I think, deliver on what people wanted from a Pokemon film, and that's great. And it's it is, I say that a lot of people watching this who aren't Pokemon fans might not necessarily enjoy it, but I do think it's well made enough and it is like funny enough to draw people in and get people at least somewhat interested.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. On to the sequel, please.
On to the sequel.
I
it does end in a way that you're like, well, how do we get Detective Pikachu again? Because Ryan Reynolds pops out. That was a good twist as well. I didn't see that coming.
I'm happy if Detective Pikachu doesn't return and this world returns. I know that lots of people might want to see what does Detective Pikachu do next, but I'm confident enough in that Red Blue idea, this wider franchise, that they don't need Detective Pikachu for the Pokemon cinematic universe to go on.
Yeah.
I don't know.
That makes sense.
I hope
Makes sense. Cool. I think that's pretty much it. Any last thoughts on Detective Pikachu before we move on?
There's just a lot of cute Pokemon in that film, and I was like, wow, they're really cute.
Yeah, it was good. I enjoyed it quite a bit. Great. Okay, well, we're going to close out the show then. Lots of fun things coming up because we are in E3 season. Very exciting times. So there is a plan of action in terms of when the next episode is coming out, because E3 is in 2 weeks, and obviously we don't want to put out an episode on the Monday before of E3 because obviously a lot of things are happening and we're watching it and things like that, but also Nintendo's thing is on the Tuesday, which is Tuesday the 11th of June. So what we do, as we all do regularly and we always do each year, is that we're going to take the next episode, which should come out on Monday the 10th of June, and we're bringing it forward. We're bringing it forward to Friday the 7th. So the next episode of the show will be Friday the 7th of June, and that show will be our predictions for E3. So it gives you time to listen to it over the weekend before the Nintendo things happen, so that you can hear our predictions and see how wrong or right we are, which is always fun. That's a good thing to do. So that's when that is coming out. That is Friday the 7th of June. Alongside that, we'll also be doing a reaction to what Nintendo announces. So depending on, when we watch the Direct on Tuesday, when we're able to record, we'll record that evening, probably on Tuesday the 11th, and I will edit it together and throw it up as soon as I possibly can, as I usually do, just try and get it out quickly, and get our hot takes, our thoughts on Nintendo's E3. So we're getting 2 episodes. The first one will be Friday the 7th, which will be our predictions, and then the bonus episode will be our E3 show where we talk about what Nintendo unveiled during their Direct, and that will be on the 11th, which is Tuesday.
And then we're back to our normal show, June 24th, episode 146.
Yes, absolutely. So and that show will probably be a wrap-up and kind of, if there was anything announcing the Treehouse, things like that, we'd kind of go over those types of things. So yeah, that's pretty much the plan. With that said, we would like to maybe get some prediction from you guys. So if you want to send those in, get those in as soon as you can, because of course we're on a more compressed schedule. We're probably going to be recording a little bit earlier as well as a result of that. So send those emails to our email address, which Bally will tell you now.
Please send them to ThisNintendoLife@gmail.com. That is ThisNintendoLife@gmail.com. Please send them in.
Absolutely, and we'll read some of those potentially on that show for our predictions. Great. I think that you can go and find us in lots of places, but the best place to go is to review us on iTunes. We haven't pushed that in a while, but if you want to help the show grow and let people know about it, especially during this E3 time where lots of people are going to be looking for people talking about Nintendo's E3 presence, we'd really appreciate this moment if you went and took some time out to just drop us a review on iTunes. Just say whatever you think about the show, unless it's negative, in which case keep your opinions to yourself.
These guys are really good at talking about E3.
They're just really
time
good.
Of year. That's why you want to listen to them at
you
this time.
You should subscribe
to
this podcast because you want to hear their opinions, because they're very articulate and knowledgeable, etc., etc. Yes, so that would be great if you could do that. It would be super appreciated. Obviously, you can find the show in various places. We're on iTunes, or on Stitcher, or on Spotify. All good podcasting apps. You can download us. Just search for This Nintendo Life. We should pop up. You should be able to download us there pretty easily. And we also have a Patreon where you can get some bonus episodes and things like that. And Bally, would you like to tell them where they can find that and thank some of our patrons?
Yes, thank you to our 2 $10 tier patrons. They're, of course, my fiance Caroline and Atari Alex. Thank you for your support. And also thank you to all of our other patrons. We hugely appreciate it. We just recorded a TNL Takes episode on Game of Thrones. We talked about this season, the most recent episode, the final episode, I should say, and all the previous seasons and what we thought about it, and a bit of chat about the books as well. And that is available for $5 tier patrons. You can download all 18 episodes of our Patreon exclusive shows for $5. So make sure you check that out at patreon.com/ThisNintendoLife.
Fantastic. You can find us in various places around the internet if you want to get updates on when episodes are going out and things that we're doing. You can head to our Twitter account, which is at TNL Podcast. You can find me at LordNBZ, where I spout a bunch of nonsense. Bally, where can they find you?
I'm on Twitter at Ballyman91, BALLYMAN91, and I also spout my own ton of nonsense.
Yes, absolutely. So check us out there. Maybe I'll just drop a plug here. I've been streaming a lot recently as well. So if you're interested in me playing random weird video games like the GameCube classic Piano 3, then you can check out my stream, which is twitch.tv/LordNBZ.
You've even done the most recent episode of your Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess Let's Play.
I have, yes, which, that's a very, very niche subset.
Which there will definitely, as you said, be a BuzzFeed article on one day.
Yes.
You'll be interviewed and asked when you're 95 years old.
Right.
How's the finale of Twilight Princess going, NBZ?
I look forward to that day, Bally. I really do. It'll be a fun one. But yes, if you want to check me out on Twitch, that's twitch.tv/LordNBZ. I'm streaming on weekends and like some evenings and things like that. So just head over there, check. I've got kind of a schedule up, and join me on some adventures. That'd be fun. That's pretty much it for the show, though. So we will see you next time before E3. So the hype begins, people. We're very, very excited, and we will see you all then. Thank you. Bye-bye. The musical interlude used on today's show was the title theme from Super Mario Maker, copyright Nintendo 2015.